I got home just after 6, same as always, and the first thing I heard was nothing. Not quiet, nothing. The kind of silence that sits wrong in a house that's supposed to have someone in it. My wife Lorraine had been home all day. Her car was in the driveway. The kitchen light was on. But the moment I stepped through the door, something felt off in a way I couldn't explain. The way a room feels different after someone's been crying in it, even after the crying stops. I set my keys on the counter and called her name. No answer. I walked down the hall and found her in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with her back to me. She wasn't crying out loud. She was past that. Her shoulders were folded in like she was trying to make herself smaller, and her right hand was pressed flat against her thigh in a way that looked deliberate, like she was holding something down. Lorraine. She turned, and I saw her face. I've been married to this woman for 38 years. I know every version of her face, the laughing one, the tired one, the worried one she gets when she can't sleep. What I saw that evening I had never seen before. It wasn't just sadness, it was something older, something defeated. "I'm fine," she said. "I just had a rough afternoon." I didn't push. I sat down next to her, put my hand over hers, and waited. That's the thing about long marriages. Sometimes you don't need words. You just need to be present and patient and let the person find their own way to telling you. But she didn't tell me, not that night. She said she was tired. She went to bed early. I warmed up the leftover soup from the night before, ate it standing at the kitchen sink, and told myself she'd talk to me when she was ready. It took me 2 more days to realize she was never going to tell me on her own. Our daughter-in-law, Shelby, had been around a lot in recent months. She and our son Theo had moved back to North Carolina from Phoenix about a year earlier, and at first I thought it was a good thing. We weren't getting younger, and having them close again felt like a second chance at something we'd missed when they were across the country. Theo is 41. He works in commercial real estate, or he used to. The Phoenix market had treated him well for a while, but things got complicated, he said. He never explained exactly how complicated. What I knew was that when they moved back, they moved into a rental in Greensboro, about 20 minutes from our house, and they weren't paying for it themselves, not entirely. We'd helped. Lorraine and I had put together a little over $14,000 for their first few months, security deposit, moving costs, some furniture because they'd sold most of theirs before the move. I didn't resent it. He's my son. You help your kids when they need it. What I didn't know then was that $14,000 was just the beginning. The visit started feeling different around October. Before that, Theo and Shelby would come for dinner, stay a few hours, talk about normal things, but somewhere around fall, the dynamic shifted. Shelby started coming alone during the day when Theo was supposedly at the office. She and Lorraine would sit at the kitchen table for long stretches. Sometimes I'd come home and see Shelby's car pulling out of the driveway, and Lorraine would be quiet all through dinner. I asked once. Lorraine said they were just talking, catching up. I believed her because I wanted to. The afternoon I came home and found her on the bed. I played it back in my head all evening. The way she'd been pressing her hand against her thigh. The way she flinched, just slightly, when I touched her shoulder. Not like she was afraid of me, like she was sore. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I noticed her cardigan on the back of the bathroom door. I wasn't snooping. I was going to hang it up. But when I moved it, the sleeve caught, and I saw the inside of her forearm. There was a bruise old enough that it had gone greenish-yellow at the edges, about 2 inches wide, shaped like a grip. I stood there for a long time with that cardigan in my hands. A bruise like that doesn't come from bumping a door frame. A bruise like that comes from someone holding on too hard. I didn't say anything to Lorraine. Not yet. I didn't know enough, and I knew that if I said the wrong thing, she'd close down completely. She has a way of protecting people she loves, even when those people don't deserve it. Instead, I went to the garage, got my laptop, and pulled up the security system. We'd installed cameras about 3 years ago after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. Front door, back door, driveway, and one in the main hallway. Nothing invasive, just coverage of the common areas. I'd mostly forgotten about them. The footage cycles every 30 days. I pulled up the past 2 weeks. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I think some part of me was hoping I'd find nothing, that I'd feel foolish and relieved and go back inside and make pancakes for my wife and chalk the whole thing up to an old man's paranoia. That's not what happened. On a Tuesday, 11 days earlier, Shelby's car pulled into our driveway at 12:47 in the afternoon. The front door camera caught her coming in. Lorraine let her in herself, and from the angle of the shot, they looked normal. Hugging, smiling, the usual. But they were inside for almost 2 hours before anything else happened on camera. At 2:31, the hallway camera caught them coming out of the kitchen together. Shelby was holding papers. A folder, actually, the kind with the metal clasp at the top. Lorraine was walking slightly behind her, which was odd. Lorraine is not a woman who follows. She leads. She always has. At 2:44, the same camera showed them in the hallway again. This time Lorraine had the folder in her hands. She was looking at something inside it. Shelby was standing very close to her, closer than you stand when you're just talking, and she had one hand on Lorraine's upper arm. Not affectionately, firmly. I watched the clip 4 times. Each time I noticed something new. The way Lorraine's head was bent, not reading, more like she was looking away from something she didn't want to see. The way Shelby's jaw was set. The way Lorraine's free hand came up and pressed flat against her own chest, the way people do when they're frightened. At 2051, Lorraine signed something. I could tell by the motion pen to paper, a pause, then Shelby taking the folder back quickly. At 2053, Lorraine walked toward the back of the house alone. Shelby stood in the hallway for a moment, looking at whatever was in the folder. Then she left through the front door. The timestamp on Shelby's exit was 2054. I sat in my garage for a long time after watching that. Then I went back further. 3 weeks before that visit, same pattern. Shelby's car in the driveway. A long stretch inside. This time the hallway camera caught something I almost missed. Lorraine reaching out to grab the wall when Shelby turned away from her, like she'd lost her footing, or like her knees had gone briefly weak. 5 days before that, another visit, this one shorter. Shelby came in, the camera showed her in the hallway alone at one point, while Lorraine must have been in another room. And Shelby was on her phone, pacing. I couldn't hear anything, of course, but her body language was tight, agitated. I made myself write down every date, every timestamp. Then I called my brother-in-law, Bernard, who'd spent 30 years as a paralegal in Charlotte before he retired. I didn't tell him everything. I just described what I'd seen on camera, a family member repeatedly visiting, documents being signed under what looked like pressure, and asked him what that could mean legally. He was quiet for a moment. "Harlan," he said, "what kind of documents?" "I don't know yet." Another pause. "Do you have any accounts, assets, anything she might have access to? Joint accounts with Lorraine, property, anything like that?" My chest went cold. "We have a joint savings account," I said. "We have the house, and Lorraine has a separate investment account from when her mother passed. We've never touched it. It's been sitting there since 2019. How much is in it?" I told him. He told me to call a lawyer first thing Monday morning. He gave me a name. He said, "Don't wait." I didn't wait. I called the attorney Friday afternoon. She was direct, no nonsense, the kind of person you want in your corner when everything feels like it's coming apart. She told me to bring whatever documentation I had, account statements, the camera footage, anything Lorraine might have signed. She told me not to confront anyone before we met. That last part was hard. I went home that evening and sat across from my wife at the dinner table and watched her push her food around and thought about the bruise on her arm and the way her hand had shaken when she signed whatever Shelby put in front of her. And I smiled and asked her how her day was and refilled her water glass and said nothing. It was the hardest meal I'd eaten in 38 years of marriage. Saturday morning, I found a reason to get Lorraine out of the house. I asked her to go pick up the prescription refills I'd been putting off, told her mine and hers both needed to be collected. She was gone about 40 minutes. While she was out, I called the bank. Here is what I learned. 3 weeks earlier, someone had initiated a change to our joint savings account. A new authorized user had been added. The name on the authorization form was Shelby. The other side on the 42 was signed by a white. I had to sit down on the kitchen floor. I'm 63 years old, and I sat down on my own kitchen floor like my legs stopped working, which they did, more or less. I also learned that 2 transfers had been initiated from Lorraine's individual investment account, the one from her mother's estate. One for $12,000, one for $9,000. Both made within the past 6 weeks, both transferred to an account I didn't recognize. $63,000 remained in the account, but $21,000 was gone. Monday morning, I was in the attorney's office at 9 sharp. I laid out everything, the camera footage on a USB drive, the bank call notes I'd written out by hand, the dates Bernard and I had pieced together, the bruise I'd seen. The attorney listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands on the desk. "Mr. Harlan," she said, "what you're describing is financial elder abuse. What you've documented is coercion, potentially fraud, and the physical mark you've described suggests intimidation at minimum." She told me there were multiple paths forward. One was reporting directly to Adult Protective Services, which would trigger an investigation. Another was a civil suit to recover the transferred funds. Both could run simultaneously. She also recommended we get a physician to document the bruise. Even at this stage, the photographic evidence and a medical record would matter. I asked about Theo. She said it was possible he knew nothing. It was also possible he knew everything. Either way, Shelby had initiated the account change and Shelby's name was on the transfers. "Your son's culpability," she said carefully, "is something we determine in the process." I drove home with my hands tight on the wheel and my jaw tighter. I had to tell Lorraine. I had been dreading it for days, not because I was afraid of her reaction, but because I knew what it would cost her. Finding out that someone you opened your home to, someone you hugged at the front door and made coffee for and treated like a daughter, finding out that person had been methodically taking from you while you were alone and unprotected. That kind of betrayal doesn't arrive clean. It splinters. I sat her down at the kitchen table after dinner. I put the laptop in front of her and I played the clips, the one where Shelby is holding her arm, the one where she signs the folder. Lorraine watched without speaking. Her face went through things I don't have words for. When it was over, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I was ashamed." She told me what I hadn't known, that Shelby had come to her first in September, not with documents, but with a story. Theo was in trouble, a business debt, someone he'd partnered with in Phoenix who was threatening legal action. It wasn't Theo's fault, Shelby said. He didn't know the full scope, and if word got out, it could destroy his career, his reputation. She just needed Lorraine to move some money, temporarily, to an account Shelby controlled. Just to satisfy the creditor, just until things were settled. She'd give it all back, she promised. Lorraine had said no. The second visit, Shelby came back with papers. She said she'd already had an attorney draw up a loan agreement, just to make it official, just to protect everyone. She needed Lorraine's signature to release the transfer. It was just paperwork. Lorraine had still said no. The third visit, the one on camera, Shelby had grabbed her arm, not struck her. Grabbed her and held her and leaned in close and said, "If you don't do this, you're going to lose your son. Is that what you want? Do you want us to lose everything because you're being selfish?" Lorraine signed. She told me she felt sick the moment the pen left the paper. She told me she'd been lying awake every night since. She told me she didn't tell me because she was ashamed of how easily she'd been broken, and because she was afraid of what I would do. I reached across the table and took both her hands in mine. "You were not broken," I said. "You were alone, and she targeted you specifically because you love Theo, and she knew exactly where to push. That is not weakness. That is someone using the best part of you against you." Lorraine cried then, really cried, the kind that's been building for weeks. I let her. The report to Adult Protective Services went in the following Wednesday. The attorney filed simultaneously for a civil injunction to freeze the account the money had been transferred into. The bank reversed the authorization change within 48 hours once the fraud documentation was presented. APS opened an investigation. A caseworker came to the house and spoke with Lorraine privately. That was hard to sit out, but I understood the process. The caseworker confirmed what the attorney had said. What Lorraine described was a textbook case of elder financial abuse and coercive control. The documentation, the camera footage, the bank records, the bruise photograph I'd taken and time-stamped. It built a picture that was difficult to argue with. Shelby was interviewed by investigators 2 weeks later. I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what she said, but I know the transfers were traced, and the account turned out to be in both Shelby's name and Theo's, my son-in-law. He didn't initiate it, the investigators believed. The evidence pointed more clearly to Shelby as the architect, but he had known money was moving. He had benefited from it. He had said nothing. Theo called me the day after investigators spoke with him. He called from a number I didn't recognize, like he thought I might not pick up if I saw his name. He might have been right. He cried. He said he was sorry. He said he hadn't known it had gone that far, hadn't known Shelby had touched her, hadn't known how bad the pressure had gotten. He said he should have put a stop to it. He said he was weak. He said he was ashamed. I listened to all of it. When he was done, I said, "Your mother couldn't sleep for 6 weeks. She sat in this house alone while your wife grabbed her arm and threatened to take you away from her, and she didn't tell me because she was too ashamed to admit she'd been scared. That's what you let happen." He didn't say anything. "I'm not ready to talk to you," I said. "Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But your mother loves you, and she's going to want to see you eventually, and that's going to be her choice to make, not mine." I hung up and went outside and stood in the yard for a while. The sun was going down over the ridge behind the house, same as it does every evening. Same oak tree. Same worn patch of grass where we used to set up the lawn chairs in summer. Everything exactly as it had always been, and nothing the same at all. Both transfers were eventually recovered in full. The civil case moved quickly once the evidence was in place. Shelby and Theo paid the money back as part of a settlement that also included a formal agreement to have no unsupervised contact with Lorraine. Whether the state pursues criminal charges is still, as of right now, an open question. Lorraine started seeing a counselor in February. A good one, someone who specializes in trauma and family estrangement. She says it helps. I believe her because I can see it in her face. The old version of her face, the one I know. She still asks about Theo sometimes, whether I think he'll get his life together, whether she'll ever sit across from him at a table again without it being complicated. I tell her I don't know. I think that's the honest answer. What I do know is this: the worst thing about what happened wasn't the money. The money came back. The worst thing was that my wife was alone in her own home, afraid, and she couldn't tell me. She carried it by herself for weeks because the person doing it to her was our son's wife, because saying it out loud would have meant blowing up everything, and she loved us both too much to light that match. She protected us right up until the moment she couldn't anymore. If there is one thing I'd want someone reading this to hear, it's this. Pay attention when the people you love go quiet, not sad quiet, not tired quiet. That particular kind of quiet that sits wrong in a room, the kind that has weight to it. I almost missed it. I almost let it go. Check the cameras. Look at the bruises. Ask a question even when you're afraid of the answer. The truth doesn't get easier the longer you leave it alone. I keep coming back to the moment I found Lorraine sitting on the edge of that bed, her shoulders folded in, pressing her hand flat against her thigh like she was trying to hold herself together. I walked into that room as her husband of 38 years and I almost said nothing, almost let it go, almost decided it wasn't my place to push. That almost is the thing that keeps me up some nights. What I've learned, not from books, not from anything anyone told me, but from watching this whole thing unfold, is that the people who hurt us most aren't usually strangers. They're the ones we handed the keys to. Shelby knew exactly how to reach Lorraine, because Lorraine loved Theo, and Shelby used that love like a lever. She didn't need a weapon. She just needed to find the one thing Lorraine couldn't bear to lose and threaten it. That's a particular kind of cruelty that requires calculation. It doesn't happen by accident, and when I finally understood the full shape of what she'd done, I realized that doing nothing, staying quiet, keeping the peace, would have made me part of it. There's a version of me that doesn't check the cameras, that accepts she's just tired and moves on, that man loses $21,000 and never recovers the truth, and his wife carries that shame alone until it eats through the floor of the marriage. I don't want to be that man. What I want, what I think any of us who've been through something like this eventually come to, is a kind of clear-eyed honesty about the people around us, not suspicion, not paranoia, just the willingness to look directly at something uncomfortable and ask whether what we're seeing is real. Lorraine signed those papers because she trusted her instinct to protect her family over her instinct to protect herself. That's not stupidity. That is a good person being exploited for being good. The failure wasn't hers, but I think she'd tell you now that she wishes she'd trusted the small voice that said something is wrong. She heard it. She just talked herself out of it. The strength it took her to sit across from me at that kitchen table and tell me the whole truth, knowing I would be furious, knowing it would shatter something, knowing there was no clean way through. That kind of strength doesn't come easy. She had to choose honesty over self-protection. That took more courage than anything I've done in years. I told her that. I meant it. What comes next for Theo, I honestly don't know. The love doesn't stop just because the trust is broken. That's the part no one warns you about. You can be furious and heartbroken and grieving all at the same time for the same person, and none of those feelings cancel each other out. But I also know that real repair, if it ever comes, has to be built on something true. Not managed distance, not polite silence at Christmas dinner. Something true. The money came back. That part had a clean resolution. The rest of it is slower, messier, and still unfinished. But Lorraine sleeps through the night now. Most nights. That's enough for today.